Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Peter Docker, who's here to share with us his new book, Leading from the Jumpseat. How to create extraordinary opportunities by handing over control. So welcome to the show, Peter Docker.
Hi, Marianne. It's a delight to be with you on your show today.
Well, what an honor it is to have you here, Peter. My goodness, you have such an extraordinary background. What inspired you to write this book?
Well, we've had a bit of a lockdown, haven't we, in different parts of the world over the last couple of years. So it was a wonderful time when I couldn't travel to sit down and write. But I've had an extraordinary set of opportunities in my life, Marianne. I started my working career in the Royal Air Force as a pilot. I got to become quite a senior officer. I've led people in combat. I've faced aircraft emergencies and different situations. I've gone on to be a negotiator for the UK government with Russia and various other places, led huge projects, and then been a speaker around the world, worked with Simon Sinek for about 8 years, wrote a book with him. And so I've had the opportunity, one measure, I've been to 94 countries now, and had the opportunity to work with people at the leadership level in practically every industry you can imagine, and in so many different cultures. And it's been an extraordinary experience. And I thought, let's bring all that together, the things that I've learned along the way through my career and what I've learned from other people and other leaders. And let's try and put it into a book that is readable and also gives people something that they can try and put into practice. So now just seemed like the perfect time to do all that.
Well, I was real impressed with your book because you do touch on so much that I think is very powerful for a lot of people. I mean, we have a lot of people talking about the Great Resignation, where so many people have left their jobs and they're redefining themselves. And I felt that your book really kind of gives people a roadmap on maybe how to chart that new course for themselves.
Writing a book on leadership, it is focused on business, but the first part of the book, it focuses on, us, the reader, because leadership is as much about learning how to lead your own life as it is about leading others, because the better we can lead ourselves, the better we can lead others. And it's a continuous journey. I'm still learning in both those fields. I'm still learning about leading myself, and I'm still learning about how to lead others better. So yes, at a time in the world where many people have had the opportunity to sit back and reflect on where they are in their life, what's really important to them, if not redefine themselves, get greater clarity on the direction in which they want to step. And the first part of the book does actually focus very much on that. It helps the reader understand, discover what's deeply important to them. And the reason that's valuable is because when we can identify what I refer to as our non-negotiables, our drivers, what we stand for, these are unshakable, our unshakable non-negotiables. These things don't change. And when we can put those things into words, they create an enormous reservoir of energy for us to draw on, which enables us to step forward into the unknown. It enables us to overcome the challenges of change and uncertainty. Gives us a handrail to help guide us when there isn't a roadmap, when there isn't a rule book to follow, And so, yes, I think when we put in the context of what many people refer to as the Great Resignation, there are some valuable things to consider in the book, which can help many people wherever they are in the world and whatever stage they are in their career.
I know you talk about leading from the jump seat as a metaphor. So why don't you explain a little bit about that for our listeners?
Like everything in my book, it's all attached to things that have happened to me in my life or that I've been a part of. And the stories aren't there just for the sake of a good story. They're there to draw out a point around leadership, culture, leading ourselves or leading others. And the title of the book draws from an experience I had, good heavens, it's 20 years ago now, Marianne, which is scary just to think about that. But at the time, I was a senior officer and pilot in the Royal Air Force, and I flew large passenger jets, carrying around about 140 people, about the size of the the jet you'll fly on to go across the States or on holiday, vacation, whatever. And on this particular occasion, I just finished certifying a brand new captain, the guy in charge of the aircraft. And this chap was by the name of Callum. And Callum had been a first officer, a co-pilot for many years, and was a great pilot. And he'd just gone through 6 months of training to learn how to become the captain of the aircraft, responsible for the safety of the aircraft and passengers anywhere in the world. And at the end of that training, what we did was get that new captain to fly with someone like me, experienced senior guy, to do the final check to make sure that they were good to go. And this is how it was with Callum. We'd flown from London over to Washington Dulles and then on to San Francisco. And anyone who's flown to San Francisco will know it's a very busy place. So it's a good test to make sure that pilots are up to speed. And Callum did a fantastic job. And we landed, we taxied in, the passengers got off. And I turned to him, I said, Callum, you did a great job there. Many congratulations. You are now a fully certified captain. We're stopping here the night, but then in the morning, I'll be down the back with the other passengers. You'll have a regular first officer with you, and you can fly us back to Washington Dulles. As you can imagine, Marianne, that was a great moment because this guy worked really hard for it. And it was wonderful to sign him off. Anyway, the following morning, we're getting ready to go out to the aircraft. And Callum came up to me. He said, excuse me, he said, sir, because I was his senior boss, if you like. He said, can you come and sit on the jump seat? He said, for taxi and takeoff, because it's very busy during rush hour out of San Francisco. And I'd just like another pair of eyes on the flight deck, watching out for other traffic as we're taxiing out to the runway and make sure we go the right way and that sort of thing. And I thought at the time, that's a very courageous thing to do because he'd had me and other checking officers on his back for the past 6 months. And this was his chance to, not have that anymore. But no, he was connected to the higher purpose, which was the safety of the aeroplane. And he wanted me to sit on the jump seat. And the jump seat is a seat on the flight deck of many big aircraft. It's usually empty, but it's immediately behind the two pilots. You can reach them, you're that close, you can touch them on the shoulder. And you get a great view of what's going on as the aircraft is maneuvering. So that's where he wanted me to sit. And I strapped in and we taxied out. And Callum did a great job, as I knew he would. And finally, we had our clearance to take off. We thundered down the runway and we got airborne. And we're only around about 300 or 400 feet. And we had an emergency. And what I then chose to do in the next 2 seconds would dictate whether I and everybody else on the board, that aircraft that day, the 140 people, whether we would survive or not. And here's the thing. I did absolutely nothing. I sat there with my hands in my lap, quite calmly, because I knew in that moment, I didn't need to lead. I needed to become a great follower. I needed Callum to feel that I had his back so he could be the captain he needed to be and do what he needed to do to get us out of that situation. And if I hadn't have believed he could do that, then I would have had no business signing him up the day before as a fully certified captain, to fly this aircraft anywhere in the world. What I needed to do was to stay out of his way. And so that led to the notion of leading from the jump seat, because, yes, in this case, it was about an aircraft, but whatever we do in life, at some stage, we're going to hand over control. If we're the CEO of a company, we will retire. If we are the leader of a team, we will inevitably move on to another team. Or heck, if we're a parent, which is one of the biggest leadership challenges many of us face, our kids will eventually grow up, leave home, and start to lead their own lives. So leading from the jump seat is all about how can we lift others up? How can we prepare them and give them the space they need so when the time is right, they can take the lead? And it's, in my mind, the highest form of leadership because it's not about retaining or increasing one's own power. It's about empowering others. And when we do that, it turns out that in the present, it creates extraordinary teams and extraordinary performance. So that's what leading from the jump seat's all about.
Well, I just appreciate that because I think it's so powerful. And, you talk about handing over control. So where do people really get hung up with that? Because I'm sure that could be like a place where they get off into the ditch.
this is where it all comes back to getting very clear on what's deeply important to you. Everything we do in life that's important to us, Marianne, everything is driven by just one of two things. It's driven by either fear or it's driven by love. Now, I'll come back to love in a minute, because particularly when I'm talking in business circles, people get a little bit jittery when I'm talking about being driven by love. So I'll come back to that in a minute. But let's deal with fear, first of all, because that directly answers your question. Fear is generated inside of us when we sense our life is in danger. Yeah, and this is good. Thousands of years ago, it has a step back from the powerful tiger or lion or whatever. These days, it's more about making sure we jump back out of the way of an oncoming car that we didn't see, so crossing the road. So fear is good because it can, in those circumstances, help to preserve our life. But on a daily basis, for most of us, our life isn't on the line. And that's when fear also comes into play, though, because fear can be triggered when we sense that our livelihood, our status, or our reputation is on the line. And when fear is triggered because we sense our livelihood, status, or reputation is on the line, the reaction we have is not necessarily useful, because it has us closed down. It has us stop thinking about those in our team, the people we lead, and the customers we serve. It has us view the world as a place of scarcity, where it's a binary win-lose game and we've got to win. And one of the greatest things that comes out of fear is ego. Ego is the Greek for I. And excess ego is when we just start to focus on ourselves, and that is it. And this is triggered in a business sense quite often when we feel that our business is threatened, or someone else in the company is getting better recognition than us, or a whole host of other reasons where we sense that our livelihood, our status, or our reputation is on the line. So handing over control to others, it can trigger fear, because we can sense that we're relinquishing our status, our reputation, or perhaps jeopardizing our livelihood. But thankfully, there is an antidote to all this. And that is where we use fear as a warning flag. And instead of reacting with fear, we choose to respond instead from a place of love. And in this context, love looks like thinking of our people on our team and the customers we serve rather than just ourselves. It has us see the world as a place of opportunity and possibility rather than scarcity. And instead of ego, we lead with what I call humble confidence. And humble confidence is where we're absolutely resolute on where we're going. We're ready to take decisions when they need to be made. And we're clear on our strengths, but we have the humility to listen to those on our team and to have them be part of the solution to the challenges we're facing. So there are lots of examples in the book of what leading with humble confidence looks like and how it is the antidote to ego. And it's critical to harness this practice of leading with humble confidence if we don't want ego to get in our way and slow us down. And it's particularly important when we're looking at handing over control to others, so we can lift them higher and they can help accelerate our progress.
So no Mavericks on that then, right?
Well, isn't it topical at the moment? I'm hugely envious. My daughter is off to see Top Gun Maverick. I actually mentioned Top Gun in the book as well, because when I was training as a pilot in the Royal Air Force, there were one or two guys who, well, let's just say their egos entered the room before they did, because they had such big egos. But here's the thing. They generally didn't tend to do well or stick around for that long, unlike the film Top Gun. It's when you're flying in formation with a guy on your wing, you don't want that pilot being so egotistical they're just thinking about themselves. You want them thinking about the others in the formation. And so the best fighter pilots to fly with are those who don't have huge egos. They lead with humble confidence. They are resolute. They are quick to make decisions when they need to be made. And yet they have the humility to listen and engage with others, because it's about recognizing that none of us have got all the answers. And if we perpetuate the idea that we lead our team by being the one who has the answer to everything, then we limit our progress as a team by our own knowledge. Whereas leading from the jump seat is very much about learning to lead when we don't know the answer, and being comfortable with that, and drawing on the collective genius of the people around us, our team. And then we are no longer the constriction in the pipe, and our team can achieve much more than it would otherwise.
In your book, you talk about commitment. Why is that so important?
Commitment is the first practice of jump seat leadership. And commitment is it's a source of great energy. But before we can really talk about commitment, just need to take a brief step back, because where commitment comes from is being very clear on what's deeply important to us, our non-negotiables. And the reason for that is because it generates a huge reservoir of energy to move us forward. I'll give you a very quick example, because examples illustrate this perfectly. A couple of years ago, my wife gave me a phone call, and she was a bit shaky. She'd been involved in a car accident. And I was in the middle of some business calls, but I dropped everything. Everybody immediately understood. I got in the car. She was only a couple of miles down the road, and I went to her aid. Now, what's really interesting reflecting on that is, first of all, I was stepping into the unknown. I didn't know what I was going to find when I got to the scene of the accident. But there was absolutely nothing on this earth that would have stopped me from stepping into that unknown and going to support my wife. And this gives us one indication of something that is deeply important to many of us, which is family. You know, if someone in our family is in trouble, then we will go to their aid, and probably the same with, really close friends. And this is part of the energy I'm talking about, because it has a step into that unknown willingly, ready to face whatever, because we are committed to figuring it out. And we can find out other things that give us that same level of energy by examining the choices that we make in our lives, the crossroads in our lives, the things that perhaps trigger us. We can use those to uncover other aspects which are deeply important to us and give us that same level of energy to move forward. And we need that energy to draw on when we make commitments. When, leadership is often about stepping into the unknown. Whether you're a young entrepreneur starting up a new business, or as some of my examples in the book are about, leading people during combat. I don't know what's going to happen, but you have to have this unshakable commitment that you will prevail. You will take on whatever the challenges are facing you, the adversities you're going to have, and you will overcome them. And you need great energy and courage to do that. And that energy and that courage comes from what you deeply believe in, your stands, your non-negotiables. They come from a place of love, actually, rather than fear, because love is sustainable, fear is not. And they then can fuel your commitments. Commitments are when you put your stands, what you believe in, into action. That's what a commitment is. But a commitment you can only follow through on a commitment when it is fueled by the energy that comes from these stands, these non-negotiables I talk about.
You have so much great information and some amazing quotes in your book, and one really struck me. The stands we choose to take in life will guide our actions, building what others will see as important aspects of our character. This is why it is important for us to take a close look at the actions we choose to take.
Absolutely. And perhaps just expanding on that a little bit, I use quite a few distinctions in language in the book, because when we have distinctions in language, it helps us have different conversations and get different results. So here's one distinction. It's the difference between a stand and a position. A position is against something, okay? And we don't need to look far in the newspapers or politics or world affairs to find people taking up positions against something. And it's a perfectly human natural reaction to have. But the thing with a position is that in order to exist, it has to have a counter position. If there's no counter position, your position dissolves. Okay. A stand, on the other hand, is for something, not against, it's for something. And a stand is about what you believe. And the power of a stand is that it's not dependent on anything or anyone else to exist. So the example I give in the book is where two cars come to a stop, bumper to bumper, fender to fender. And that happens in the lane out of our village here in England because the road isn't wide enough for the two cars to pass. And what you often get is the two cars come to a halt and the respective drivers take up a position against one another. And that position will look like, well, you were going too fast. You need to back up to the passing place. Or my journey is more important than yours. You need to get out of my way. And the positions become more and more entrenched and nobody goes anywhere. But occasionally, one of those drivers will have a stand. And that stand could be for being courteous on the road. So immediately they meet the other car coming the other direction, they will reverse up to a passing place. And here's the interesting thing. The other driver who is ready to take up a position, their position immediately dissolves and they go on their way. And it can no longer exist. But the person who reversed up to the passing place, their stand for being courteous on the road is reinforced, it becomes stronger. It's much more powerful if we can frame what we believe in terms of a stand for something, because that is enduring. And it comes from a place of a love for something rather than the fear of something or a position against something. So taking a stand is so much more valuable, particularly when we're facing change or leading in times of uncertainty or stepping into the unknown.
I found this book to be so powerful, and you talked about it's great for people who are CEOs and parents, what have you. Who else is this book good for?
I'm sorry, I missed that last piece, Marianne.
Oh, I'm sorry. You talk about this book being great for CEOs and people who are making like life transitions. Who else would this book be designed for?
Well, I use another flying metaphor, actually, in the book. I talk about 4 stages of leadership. First is learning to fly. The second is flying. The third is teaching others to fly. And the fourth is leading from the jump seat. And what those look like is this, learning to fly, first of all, that applies quite often to perhaps someone who is just about going to college or university. They're trying to figure out what's deeply important to them, their path in life they want to choose. And we all go through that. Some people might go straight into the workplace or take up apprenticeships. But it's a time of figuring it out. But then say we've gone to college and, I don't know, we've graduated in computer science or whatever it is. We then get employed for our new skills. And we get into that job. And that's when we start to enter the second phase, which I call flying. And flying is when, well, some people might call it being in flow, when it's really good. I'm sure at the start of your broadcasting career, Marianne, at the start, you're a bit unsure, but then you became the professional you are and you're just in flow, and you were loving it. And that's when we'd say you're flying. But then perhaps you then get promoted and all of a sudden you're not doing the job that you were hired to do initially. You are looking after a team of people who are doing that work. And that's when we step into the third stage, which is teaching others to fly. And that's where you're starting to lift others up and share your experience and help them grow. But then finally, perhaps you become senior in an organization and you start to take a step back. Maybe you become CEO of an organization or chairman or something like that, or as a parent, maybe it's the stage when your kids leave home, and start to lead their own lives. You're still there. You've still got people's backs. You're still there for advice, but you're empowering them. They are doing the leading. They are moving forward, and you're just there to have their backs. And that's the fourth stage. That's leading from the jump seat. And whilst I've tracked that through a sort of chronological example of someone going to university and getting a job in computing or whatever, what's really interesting is that we can be in different stages in different parts of our life. So, for example, I got together with a wonderful person, leader that I worked with 20 plus years ago, the rather gloriously named Lieutenant General Sir James Dutton, KCB, CBE and Bar. He's been knighted not once but twice by Her Majesty the Queen, which is a very special thing. And he's an extraordinary leader. But I met him a few months ago and we went for a walk, and he's just retired. He's in his 70s now. And he was absolutely leading from the jump seat in his role as a senior military officer. But now he's back to learning to fly again, because he's learning what it means to be retired. And he's figuring out, again, what's deeply important to him and what choices he wants to make during his retirement. So the benefit of this structure of the 4 stages is that we can take what we've learned in one area of our life and apply it to accelerate our progress and enjoyment in a different area of our life too. So in answer to your question, there is something in this book, at the end of each chapter, there's a consider this section, which wherever you are on that ladder of the 4 stages, there are things to consider that you could use to apply the ideas and concepts in the chapters.
Well, I felt that Leading from the Jump Seat was just a phenomenal read. Peter, where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your work?
Well, I have a website, cunningly named leadingfromthejumpseat.com. So you can find me there, and there are videos and resources. I'm on the usual places: LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. And the book itself is available internationally. There's a US version, a British version, international version, hardback, paperback, audiobook, and ebook. And I continue to travel around the world. That's picking up again now as the restrictions ease. And I'm speaking in the States and Europe and Far East and whatever, and developing courses that people who are part of large organizations can use to teach this stuff without me having to be there. So there's lots of resources that are due to come out later this year too.
Well, we look forward to seeing that, Peter. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Marianne, it's been an absolute delight. Thank you so much for your questions.
Well, thank you, Peter. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your book, Leading from the Jump Seat. Leading from the Jump Seat's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And remember, support our indie bookstores. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary. A recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.